Her name was Tanya Moore, 26 years old, black, waitress at a small-town diner in Birmingham, Alabama. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon, the kind that made time crawl. The place smelled like coffee and old biscuits, and the hum of the ceiling fan was the only thing keeping her company. Then they walked in, a man in a tailored navy suit, a woman in pearls, and an elderly lady, frail, quiet, holding a small notepad. Tanya smiled, the way she always did. "Good afternoon, folks. Table for 3? The man gave her a look, cold, calculated. "The booth's fine," he muttered. "And make sure she understands," he added, pointing at the old lady. "She's deaf." The woman beside him laughed softly. "Like she'll even understand you, honey." Tanya's smile flickered, but she nodded. "No problem at all." She led them to a booth near the window, pulled out her small pad, and knelt down beside the older woman. She wrote gently on her notepad, "Hi, ma'am. I'm Tanya. I'll be your waitress today." The old lady's face lit up. She nodded and scribbled back, "Thank you, dear. You write clearly." But before Tanya could respond, the man interrupted. "We don't need her playing games. Just take our orders." Tanya stood up, confused. "Sir, I said just take the order." His tone snapped through the air like a whip. The woman snickered again. "This is why they should stick to their own places." The diner went silent. Every sound, the sizzle from the kitchen, the clink of plates, stopped. Tanya froze. Her hands trembled, but she forced a steady voice. "Sir, with all due respect, you don't talk to anyone like that. Especially not your grandmother." Gasps. Eyes turned. The man's face burned red. "You don't know who I am?" "No," Tanya said quietly. "But I know who I am." The air was thick enough to choke on. "If you're watching this, tell me where you're from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe." Because what happened next? It shocked everyone in that diner. As Tanya walked away to get their drinks, she didn't notice the old woman scribbling something furiously on her notepad. But when she returned, the note was waiting for her. It said, "Don't worry, dear. I heard everything." And under that, a name. One Tanya would never forget. Tanya stood frozen, staring at the old woman's note. "Don't worry, dear. I heard everything." Her heart skipped. For a second, she thought she read it wrong. The woman wasn't supposed to hear anything. She was deaf. But the woman gave her a knowing look, the kind that said, "Not everything is as it seems." Tanya tucked the note into her apron, glancing toward the man and woman across the table. They were too busy laughing at something on the man's phone to notice. She forced a professional smile. "Would you like to order now?" The man didn't look up. "Yeah, make it quick. My grandmother's food should be soft. She can't chew much." "Yes." "Sir?" Tanya took the order, but when she turned to leave, the woman muttered under her breath, "You'd think she'd at least move faster." That one stung. Not because of what was said, but how it was said. Like she wasn't human. Back in the kitchen, Tanya leaned against the counter. Her co-worker, Joe, noticed her pale face. "You okay?" "Yeah," she lied. "Just customers being—" "Customers," Joe sighed. "Same ones that came in with that big-shot lawyer? The ones with the Bentley outside?" Tanya blinked. "You know them?" Joe nodded. "That's Michael Crawford. His family owns Crawford Industries, biggest development company in the state. The old lady's his grandma, Evelyn Crawford. People say she's the real reason the business even exists." Tanya looked down at the note again. The handwriting was elegant, careful. Something about it made her chest tighten. When she brought their food out, she noticed Evelyn scribbling again. She slid the folded paper across the table discreetly, while Michael argued with his wife about his phone's signal. Tanya took it, her hands slightly shaking. Inside, it read, "Don't react to him. He likes to make people feel small. But you, dear, you're stronger than that." And below that, one more line. "I want to tell you something before he finds out who you are." Before she could process it, Michael slammed his fork down. "Where's our drinks?" "You people really can't get anything right." Tanya felt every word like a slap. The "you people" wasn't just about service. It was about color. Every instinct told her to walk away. But something about the old woman's eyes, kind but burning with hidden truth, made her stay. She walked calmly back to the counter. "I'll get your drinks now, sir." Joe watched her with quiet worry. "You don't have to take that, Tanya." She smiled faintly. "I know, but something tells me I'm supposed to." As she carried the drinks back to the table, she noticed Evelyn's notepad open again. And this time, Tanya caught just a glimpse of what the old woman was writing. Only 4 words, but they made her stop in her tracks. "You remind me of her." Who was her? And why did Evelyn look at Tanya like she already knew her story? Tanya's hand trembled as she set the tray down. She tried to focus on the drinks, but her eyes kept darting to the note Evelyn had left open. "You remind me of her." The old woman's wrinkled hands moved slowly as she folded the paper, her eyes flicking up to Tanya's, a small, knowing smile playing at her lips. Tanya wanted to ask, "Remind you of who?" But the look on Michael's face stopped her. He was watching. Every move, every breath, like he was daring her to make one mistake. Tanya backed away, keeping her composure. She'd been in situations like this before. Racist customers. Snide remarks. People who thought a waitress's uniform gave them permission to be cruel. But this felt different. It wasn't just about disrespect. There was a story buried under those sharp words, one that Evelyn clearly wanted to tell. When the rush died down, Tanya found a moment to breathe. She poured herself a coffee and glanced over at the booth. Michael was scrolling through his phone again. His wife was fixing her lipstick in a compact mirror. Evelyn was watching Tanya, and when their eyes met, she mouthed something. Silent, deliberate. Break time. Tanya hesitated. She shouldn't, but something deep inside urged her to listen. She took a quick break and stepped outside. The air was cool, heavy with the smell of rain. Moments later, the diner door creaked open, and Evelyn Crawford slowly stepped out, clutching her notepad. Tanya rushed over. "Ma'am, you shouldn't." Evelyn shook her head and wrote quickly, "Please, just for a minute." She tore out a page and handed it to Tanya. The handwriting was slightly shaky but clear. "You remind me of my daughter. She was strong like you, brave and kind. But the world broke her anyway." Tanya frowned. I don't understand," Evelyn wrote again, slower this time. "Michael's mother." "She married a black man. My son disowned her, said she brought shame to the family. I never forgave him for that." Tanya's breath caught. "You mean your daughter?" Evelyn nodded, tears welling. "She died years ago, alone. Michael never met his father. He grew up hating a man he never knew." Tanya felt her throat tighten. The weight of it all sank in. The venom in Michael's words, the disgust in his tone. It came from something passed down, poisoned bloodline pride. Evelyn reached for Tanya's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "But today, when I saw you stand up to him, I saw her again. I saw hope." The words hit Tanya like a storm. For a moment, she forgot the diner, the customers, the humiliation. She only saw a grandmother trying to mend decades of damage, one act of courage at a time. But before she could respond, the door slammed open. Michael's voice thundered. "Grandma! What are you doing out here with her?" Evelyn flinched. Tanya stepped forward instinctively. "She's fine, sir." "We were just enough," he snapped. "You don't talk to her unless I say so." Tanya clenched her jaw. "Sir, with all due respect." He took a step closer, his tone dripping with contempt. "Don't you sir me. You don't belong here. You think standing up to me makes you special? You're still just Michael." The voice didn't come from Tanya. It came from Evelyn, and even though it was faint, raspy, and broken, it was the first word she had spoken aloud in years. Everyone froze. Evelyn stared at him, trembling. Then she whispered the next words, clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You owe her an apology." You could have heard a pin drop. Every fork froze midair. Every whisper died. Even the sizzling sound from the kitchen faded like the world itself paused to listen. Evelyn Crawford, the woman everyone thought was deaf, had just spoken, and her words hit harder than a slap. "You owe her an apology." Michael's mouth hung open. His face turned the color of raw anger. "Grandma, what? How?" But Evelyn didn't stop. Her voice cracked, fragile but fierce. "I said, apologize." Tanya couldn't move. Her heart raced so fast it hurt. The room felt unreal, like a dream she wasn't supposed to witness. The other customers whispered, "Did she just talk? I thought she couldn't hear." "She's his grandmother?" Michael stammered. You're not supposed to what?" Evelyn's voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. "Speak? Stand up for someone?" "I've stayed quiet long enough." Her trembling hands reached for Tanya's arm. "This young woman showed more respect in 1 minute than you have in your entire life." Michael tried to interrupt, but Evelyn raised her palm. "Don't you dare talk over me." It was like watching decades of silence crack open all at once. The old woman turned to Tanya. "I've been pretending for years, pretending not to hear the hate, the slurs, the things my own family says behind closed doors. I was tired of fighting, but seeing you today," her voice broke, "reminded me what courage looks like." Tanya blinked back tears. "Ma'am, you don't have to." Evelyn squeezed her hand. "Yes, I do. Because people like you, people with heart, they change the air around them. You made me remember who I was before I became afraid. Michael's voice cracked with disbelief. You're taking her side over your own family? Evelyn looked him dead in the eyes. Family isn't about blood. It's about character. Every head in that diner turned toward him. Michael's wife quietly set her glass down, her face pale. Michael, let's just go. But Evelyn wasn't finished. You told her she doesn't belong here. Well, guess what? Neither do you. Not until you learn how to treat people with dignity. Michael's fists clenched. He wanted to argue, to lash out, but no words came. Because for the first time, he wasn't the one in control. Tanya stood there, tears glistening in her eyes, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Then Evelyn whispered one final sentence. Do the right thing, Michael. For once, the tension was unbearable. Michael's chest rose and fell sharply. He looked around, every face staring at him, waiting, and for the first time he looked small. He muttered something under his breath, then turned abruptly and stormed out of the diner. His wife followed, head bowed. The bell above the door jingled softly as they left. The room stayed still for a long moment. Then someone from the back clapped, then another, and another. Within seconds, the diner erupted in applause, but Tanya didn't smile. She just looked at Evelyn, this fragile, trembling woman who had carried decades of silence, and said softly, You didn't have to do that. Evelyn gave her a faint, weary smile. Yes, I did, because you reminded me what truth sounds like. The two women sat together for a moment in that quiet corner booth, one young and strong, the other old but unbroken, bound by something neither of them expected to find that day. But just as Tanya thought the storm had passed, Joe ran in from the parking lot, breathless. Tanya, you better come outside. Right now. Her heart dropped. Why? What happened? He swallowed hard. Michael's out there, and he's not alone. Tanya's stomach twisted as soon as she stepped outside. Rain drizzled across the parking lot, washing the dust off the Bentley's sleek black hood. Michael stood beside it, his suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up, pacing like a caged lion. Two other men waited near him, both in dress shirts, both looking like the type who never heard no in their lives. Evelyn followed Tanya out slowly, clutching her purse. Stay close, dear, she whispered. Michael's eyes locked on Tanya. You had to embarrass me in there, huh? In front of everyone? Tanya took a breath. I didn't embarrass you, sir. You did that all by yourself. The men beside him exchanged looks. One of them smirked. Careful, sweetheart, he said. He's not used to being talked to like that. Tanya folded her arms. Maybe that's the problem. Evelyn stepped forward. Michael, stop this. Right now. But he ignored her. You don't get it, Grandma. She thinks she's some kind of hero. All she did was play the victim. Tanya's voice cut through him, calm but sharp. You think standing up to disrespect makes me a victim? No, sir. It makes me human. The older woman's eyes welled up again. Michael, please. But Michael was too far gone, trapped in the spiral of his own ego. He took a step closer, his voice rising. You don't tell me what's right or wrong. You don't tell my family how to live. You don't— Enough! Evelyn's voice cracked through the rain like thunder. Michael froze. Evelyn's hand trembled as she reached into her purse, pulling out an envelope. She held it toward him. You want to talk about family? Then read this. He frowned. What is that? It's your mother's letter, Evelyn said quietly. The one you were never brave enough to read. Michael blinked. Mom's what? Tanya stepped back, her heart pounding. The two men exchanged uneasy looks. Evelyn continued, tears streaking her cheeks. She wrote it before she died. She wanted you to know the truth about your father, about why she left. I kept it because you weren't ready. You still aren't. She pressed the envelope against his chest. But maybe seeing her handwriting will remind you what love looks like. Michael stood frozen, staring at the letter in his hands, as if it were burning him from the inside. Tanya couldn't see what he was thinking. Anger? Guilt? Maybe both. Evelyn's voice softened. You're angry at the world because you lost your mother. But she didn't die because of love, Michael. She died because hate made her sick. Don't become the same disease. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. His shoulders slumped. For the first time, his arrogance cracked, replaced by something that almost looked like shame. Rain kept falling. The parking lot shimmered under the dull light of the diner's neon sign. Michael turned to Tanya, his eyes red, his voice low. I didn't mean to— He couldn't finish. Tanya said nothing, because sometimes silence speaks louder than any apology. Evelyn sighed, leaning on Tanya for balance. Let's go back inside, dear. As they walked toward the door, Michael called out, voice breaking. Grandma. Wait, Evelyn turned. He swallowed hard. I'll read it. I promise. For the first time that night, Evelyn smiled. That's all your mother ever wanted. Tanya watched the man standing there in the rain, letter in hand, looking smaller than she'd ever imagined he could. She didn't know if he'd changed, but she knew something had cracked open. And sometimes, that's where light gets in. Inside the diner, customers watched as Tanya guided Evelyn back to her booth. Joe whispered, "Everything okay?" Tanya gave a faint nod. For now. But deep down she knew this wasn't the end. Because when Evelyn reached for her tea, Tanya noticed something inside her purse. A folded paper, barely visible. On it, written in trembling ink, "If anything happens to me, give this to her." Her name was written below it. The diner lights flickered softly as the storm outside grew heavier. Thunder rolled across the horizon like a warning. Tanya sat beside Evelyn, her mind still spinning. The note, the confrontation, the letter to Michael, and now another one. Hidden in Evelyn's purse. Tanya didn't know what to do. She shouldn't have seen it, but her curiosity clawed at her chest like a heartbeat she couldn't ignore. Evelyn took a slow sip of her tea, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Tanya smiled faintly. "You don't need to thank me, ma'am." "Yes, I do," Evelyn said, her eyes soft but distant. "You have no idea how long I've waited for a moment like that. To finally speak." Tanya tilted her head. "So you can hear? All this time?" Evelyn nodded. "Not perfectly, but enough. I stopped talking years ago. Sometimes silence is easier than being ignored." That line hit Tanya deep, because she'd felt the same way before. Working double shifts, smiling through slurs, pretending not to hear the whispers. "She's not like us." Tanya glanced at the purse again. The paper's edge peeked out just enough for her to recognize her own name scrawled across it. "Ma'am," she began carefully, "there's something in your bag." Evelyn smiled sadly. "I know." Tanya froze. "I meant for you to see it," Evelyn continued. "It's for when I'm gone." "Gone?" Tanya's stomach dropped. "Don't say that. You're fine." Evelyn chuckled weakly. "Sweetheart, when you get to my age, you stop lying to yourself. The doctor's already told me." "My heart's failing." Tanya's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry." Evelyn reached across the table, gripping Tanya's hand. "Don't be. I've lived a long life. But before I go, I need to make something right." The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows like a restless heartbeat. "I saw something in you today," Evelyn said softly. "The strength I lost, the fire my daughter once had. That's why I wrote your name on that envelope." Tanya blinked back tears. "What's in it?" Evelyn hesitated, her gaze distant, almost fearful. "Proof. Proof of what?" Evelyn leaned closer. "That your life and mine are tied in ways you can't imagine." Tanya felt her pulse spike. "What do you mean?" Before Evelyn could answer, the diner door burst open. A cold gust swept through, and there he was again, Michael, soaked, breathing hard, but this time he wasn't shouting. He looked pale, shaken, and in his hand was the letter from his mother. "Grandma," he said quietly, voice trembling. I read it." Evelyn's eyes filled instantly. "And?" Michael looked at Tanya, then back at Evelyn. His lips trembled as he said the words that made Tanya's whole world tilt on its axis. "Mom said she had another child." Evelyn's teacup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Tanya's heart stopped. Michael turned toward her, his voice barely a whisper. She said, "You're my sister." The room went silent. No sound, no movement, just the steady tap of rain against the diner's glass. Tanya's world blurred around the edges. She blinked once, twice, then whispered, "What? What did you just say?" Michael's hands trembled as he held the soaked letter, the ink bleeding into his skin. "Mom wrote it," he said, his voice cracking. "She said she had another child. Years after she left. She didn't name you, but—" He swallowed hard. "She said she gave birth in Birmingham and left her baby with a family friend named Moore." Tanya froze. That was her last name. Her adoptive parents had told her she was taken in as an infant. No known relatives. Evelyn's lips trembled. Dear God. The diner fell into a heavy, almost holy silence. Tanya's heartbeat thundered in her ears. No, that can't be true. But Evelyn's eyes told her otherwise. The truth was standing there right in front of her, wearing guilt and rain like a confession. Michael looked lost. "I didn't know, I swear." "Mom said Grandma never approved of her being with your father. She said she ran away, had you in secret, and couldn't go back." Tanya shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "You're saying the woman who raised you was my mother too?" He nodded slowly. "Which means—" Tanya finished the sentence for him, voice shaking. "You were the one calling me names?" Michael flinched like the words themselves hit him. I didn't know. I swear, Tanya, I didn't. Stop! Her voice cracked, raw and furious. You don't get to say my name like that. You don't get to pretend this changes what you did. Evelyn reached for her. Tanya, please, no! Tanya pulled away. You all knew. Somewhere deep down you had to know the hate you were feeding was eating your own blood. Michael took a hesitant step forward. Tanya, I didn't know about you. I was raised to believe that people who looked like me were less than you. She cut in. Yeah, that part's pretty clear. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from heartbreak. Evelyn wiped her tears. Your mother wanted to protect you both. She hoped one day love would find its way back through all this hate. Tanya stared at her, chest tight. And what am I supposed to do with that now? Evelyn's answer was soft. You forgive. Not for him, for you. But Tanya wasn't ready for forgiveness. Not yet. She turned toward Michael, the man who just hours ago humiliated her in front of strangers. Now, somehow, her brother, he looked like a boy who'd just seen his world collapse. His eyes were swollen, his voice low. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just needed you to know. Tanya took a step closer. Then listen closely, she said quietly, because this is what truth sounds like. He looked up. You can't undo years of hate in a single apology. You don't get to wash your hands in my pain and call it redemption. But if you really mean what you said, her tone hardened, then prove it. Don't just be sorry. Be better. Michael's jaw trembled. I will. The words hung heavy in the air, fragile, but real. Then Evelyn reached into her purse again, sliding the envelope Tanya had seen before across the table. This, she whispered, is everything your mother wanted you to have. Her truth, her regrets, and her love, both of you. The two siblings stared at the letter. The rain outside slowed, and somewhere between the thunder and the tears, the faintest light began to break through the clouds. But as Tanya reached for the envelope, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, followed by Joe's voice yelling, Call 911! Tanya turned just in time to see Evelyn slump forward, clutching her chest. Grandma! Michael screamed. Tanya rushed to her side, hands shaking. Ma'am, Evelyn, stay with me! Please! Evelyn's eyes fluttered open, weak but calm. She whispered, Tell her story, Tanya. Promise me. And then her hand went limp. Tanya's hands trembled as she pressed them over Evelyn's chest. Someone call an ambulance! She screamed, but her voice felt miles away. The world blurred into sirens, shouting, chaos. Michael fell to his knees beside her, clutching Evelyn's other hand. Grandma, stay with us, please! His voice broke apart like glass. Joe ran from the counter, phone pressed to his ear. They're on their way. Just hold on! Rain hammered the diner windows, wind howling like it was morning, too. Tanya's heart pounded. She leaned close, tears streaking her face. Evelyn, you're going to be okay. Do you hear me? You're not leaving now. Evelyn's eyes fluttered open one last time. She looked at Tanya, not at Michael, not at the paramedics now rushing in, but at her. Her lips moved faintly. 2 words, keep fighting. And then she was gone. The sound that came out of Michael didn't sound human. It was pain in its purest form, raw, ugly, breaking him from the inside out. Tanya sat back, staring at the lifeless woman who'd stood up for her, who'd told her the truth, who'd given her the one thing she never had, family. When the paramedics wheeled Evelyn's body away, the diner felt emptier than ever. The hum of the neon sign outside buzzed weakly, casting red and blue reflections on the wet floor. Michael sat in silence. No arrogance, no attitude, just a man stripped bare of everything he thought made him powerful. Tanya turned to leave, but he spoke softly. She really loved you, didn't she? Tanya wiped her tears. She loved truth. That's what she saw in both of us, even when we didn't deserve it. Michael nodded slowly. I want to change, Tanya. I don't know how yet, but I can't go back to who I was. She studied him, the same man who had once humiliated her, now staring at his reflection in the diner window like he didn't recognize it. Then start with her, Tanya said quietly. Honor what she stood for. Don't let her death mean nothing. He looked down at the envelope on the table, the one Evelyn had left for Tanya. Do you want to read it? Tanya hesitated. Her fingers brushed the paper, still damp from the rain. She nodded. He unfolded it carefully, and together they read the fading words written in Evelyn's trembling handwriting. My dearest Tanya, if you are reading this, it means I've finally found peace. You and Michael were both born from love, a love the world couldn't understand. But I see now that love never dies. It just changes shape. I spent years silent, afraid to face what my silence allowed to grow. You must not make the same mistake. Use your voice. Speak for those who can't. And when the world tells you to stay quiet, talk louder. Forgive your brother. He carries my daughter's pain. And forgive me for waiting too long to tell you who you are. Your strength is your inheritance. Your compassion is your power. Use them both. And never stop fighting. Evelyn Crawford Tanya's hands shook as she folded the letter back up. Tears fell freely, but they weren't the same kind of tears as before. These were heavier, but healing. Michael whispered, "She believed in you." Tanya nodded. "Then I'll make her proud." Outside, the rain slowed to a mist. A pale sun tried to break through the clouds. As the ambulance drove off, its lights fading in the distance, Tanya turned to Michael one last time. "You have a lot to unlearn," she said gently. "But if you're serious, start by helping people she would have helped." He nodded, eyes red but sincere. "I will." Tanya gave him one last look. "Then maybe someday we can call each other family." She walked away, her reflection fading against the wet glass doors, leaving Michael standing alone, clutching the letter like it was the last piece of redemption he'd ever hold. And for the first time in his life, he whispered the truth out loud. "I'm sorry." The diner's neon light flickered once more, glowing faintly over the words, "Open 24 hours," because some places, and some hearts, never truly closed. 2 weeks later, the diner was quieter now. No noise from the lunch rush, no clatter of plates, just the soft hum of the coffee machine and the steady rhythm of rain tapping the window again. Tanya stood behind the counter, staring at Evelyn's old booth. The cushion still had a faint crease where she used to sit. Her teacup, the one Joe refused to throw away, sat on the table, polished, empty, waiting. "Still thinking about her?" Joe asked gently, wiping down the counter. Tanya nodded. "Every day." Her voice cracked slightly. "Feels strange without her here. Like the diner lost its heartbeat." Joe sighed. "People like her don't just leave. They echo." He wasn't wrong. Since that night, word had spread fast. Customers talked about the old lady who found her voice and the waitress who stood up to hate. News outlets even called, asking Tanya to share her story. But she hadn't said yes. Not yet, because every time she thought about it, she heard Evelyn's whisper, "Use your voice. Speak for those who can't." And that wasn't something you rushed. That was something you honored. The doorbell jingled softly. Tanya looked up and froze. Michael stood there. Different this time. No suit, no arrogance. Just jeans, a gray sweater, and eyes that looked like they'd finally seen themselves clearly. He carried a small framed photo, Evelyn in her garden, smiling, sunlight in her hair. "Can I sit?" he asked quietly. Tanya nodded. "Of course." He placed the photo gently on the booth table. "I wanted her to be here. Just one more time." Tanya smiled faintly. "She'd like that," Michael exhaled shakily. "I've been reading her journals. The ones she left at her house?" "Oh?" He nodded. "She wrote about my mom. About your dad. About what fear did to this family." He looked down, ashamed. "I didn't realize how poisoned I'd become, how much hate I'd inherited without question. I've been working with a community group downtown, the ones Mom used to volunteer for. They help young people who face discrimination. I figured it's a start." Tanya's throat tightened. "That's more than a start." He smiled weakly. "You were right, you know. Saying sorry doesn't fix things. Doing something does." Tanya nodded slowly. "Evelyn would be proud." He looked at her. "I hope so." There was a long pause. Not awkward. Just full. Then Michael said quietly, "I was wondering if you'd join me. There's a fundraiser next week for the diner staff scholarship, in Evelyn's name. They're setting up a small reading, too. Maybe you could tell her story?" Tanya froze for a moment. The thought of it terrified her, but it also felt right. She looked at Evelyn's teacup, at the framed photo, at the rain streaking down the window. "Yeah," she said softly. "I will." That night, she sat by her apartment window reading Evelyn's letter again. Each word felt like a seed, one that had finally begun to grow. When the night of the fundraiser arrived, the small community hall was packed. Tanya stood at the podium, palms sweating, voice trembling. She looked out into the crowd, familiar faces from the diner. Strangers, Michael sitting in the front row holding the same photo. Tanya took a breath. Then she began. "I met a woman who pretended she couldn't hear the world because the world never listened to her. But that day in the diner, she spoke, and her voice changed everything. People leaned forward, captivated. Racism isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides in smiles, in silence, in things we don't say. But courage, real courage, is when you stand up anyway. Evelyn did. And because of her, I will too. The room erupted in applause. Michael wiped his eyes, trying to hide it, but failing beautifully. Afterward, Tanya stepped outside, the cool night air washing over her. The moon glowed faintly above the clouds, and she swore she could hear Evelyn's soft laughter in the wind. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll keep fighting." A voice behind her said quietly, "We both will." It was Michael. They stood together for a moment, two people who had once been enemies, now bound by blood, truth, and loss. And for the first time, it didn't hurt to stand side by side. Racism doesn't always start with hate. Sometimes, it starts with ignorance passed down like an inheritance. But the moment someone decides to break that chain, to speak up, to listen, to forgive, something extraordinary happens. Healing begins. What would you have done in Tanya's place? Would you have stood up, spoken out? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories about courage, compassion, and standing up against discrimination. Because sometimes one voice is enough to change everything.